You know, if you spend any time at all in online political debates, you've definitely seen this happen. A big study on political violence comes out, and boom, the comments are instantly flooded with people saying the numbers are fake, the researchers are biased, and that they're totally ignoring violence from one side. It's a really serious accusation, right? It cuts right to the heart of how we even begin to understand extremism. So, are the stats we see on political violence fundamentally broken? Is there some massive blind spot in the data? Let's dig in and find out. Okay, this is the core claim we're going to investigate today. The idea that all these researchers, major institutions, and even the government are somehow working together to hide political violence from left-wing extremists. Now, to see if there's any truth to that, we can't just look at the headlines. We have to go straight to the source. So, to really get to the bottom of this, we first have to understand how this data is even collected in the first place. I mean, before we can judge the results, we have to look at the process, because the answer to our big question, it's hiding in the methodology. It's really the only way to get past all the online shouting and get to what's real. So who exactly is doing all this tracking anyway? Well, the data doesn't just come from some single biased source. It's actually put together by a whole range of really respected, nonpartisan institutions. We're talking about the research group for the Department of Justice, major think tanks like CSIS, civil rights watchdogs like the ADL, and top-tier universities like UC Davis. They all have a piece of the puzzle. And they use these incredibly detailed tools, like the PIRUS database. This thing is funded by the National Institute of Justice, and it was designed from the ground up to be cross-ideological. Its entire job is to track extremists from every background: far right, far left, Islamist, and even single-issue groups. The system is literally built not to leave anyone out. Okay, so we've seen how the data gets collected with a system that's designed to include everybody. So, what does that data actually show us? All right, let's dive into the numbers, and we'll look at a few different data sets to get the full picture. Let's start with the absolute most severe form of violence, homicide. Looking at data from the National Institute of Justice that goes all the way back to 1990, the difference is, well, it's pretty staggering. Far-right extremists were responsible for over 520 deaths in 227 separate events. Over that same time, far-left extremists were responsible for 78 deaths in 42 events. Now, let's zoom in a bit and look at more recent data on all terror incidents, not just the fatal ones. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, between 2016 and 2024, there were 152 attacks and plots from right-wing extremists. In that same window, 41 from left-wing extremists. The pattern is pretty consistent. And when you look at how deadly these incidents were, the gap gets even wider. Those right-wing incidents led to 112 deaths, compared to 13 deaths from the left-wing incidents. So the data, both on the number of attacks and their deadliness, is really pointing in one clear direction. Okay, but you hear this a lot, right? Some people try to separate the MAGA movement from the broader far right. Well, researchers at UC Davis looked at that exact question. They surveyed thousands of people to see what, if anything, was different. And their findings were pretty eye-opening. When they asked people if violence was justified to achieve certain political goals, more than 58% of self-identified MAGA Republicans said yes to at least one. That is a way higher number than for any other group, including other Republicans. And get this, the survey also found that if they were in a situation that justified violence, nearly 19% of MAGA Republicans predicted they would be armed with a gun. That is almost 4 times the rate of non-Republicans. And of course, these attitudes aren't just theoretical. They have very real consequences. The January 6th attack on the Capitol is the biggest example. We're talking about roughly 140 police officers injured and over 1,200 people charged. The seriousness of it is reflected in those sentences. Leaders of groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers getting decades in prison. But look, an honest look at the data means we have to confront all the trends, even the ones that are surprising. And in 2025, something very, very strange happened in the data. After years of averaging about 20 incidents a year like clockwork, right-wing terror plots just fell off a cliff. CSIS only tracked a single incident in the entire first half of 2025. So what on earth could explain a drop that big? Well, the leading theory from the experts is that it's tied directly to the political climate. The idea is that with a new administration in power, Some of these extremist groups feel like their grievances, whether it's about immigration or the deep state or diversity programs, are finally being heard. And when they feel like they have a voice in power, maybe that impulse for violence goes down. But, and this is a really big but, this drop in one specific category doesn't mean the threat of extremism just vanished. The ADL's data shows it's still a massive concern. In just the first 6 weeks of 2025, there were 15 extremist-related murders. That's already more than all of 2024. Now, 14 of those did come from a single jihadist attack, which just shows you how incredibly complex this whole landscape is. So, after looking at the methods, the history, the recent numbers, and even the weird anomalies, what's the big picture? What's the main takeaway from all this?
Okay, let's just boil it down. Number one, the system itself, the foundation of this research, is comprehensive. The tools are built to track extremism from all sides, period. Two, the history is clear. When you look at decades of data, there is a massive, unambiguous disparity in lethal violence. And three, context matters. The political weather can change things in the short term, for sure, but that doesn't just wipe away the long-term historical record.
At the end of the day, reality is just way more complicated than simple online narratives. As the National Institute of Justice itself says, there's no single, easy profile for an extremist. It's a messy mix of beliefs and personal problems. And that is exactly why we need this kind of comprehensive, unbiased data, not just anecdotes and talking points. And that brings us to the final question, which is really a challenge for all of us. The data is out there, the methods are public. The next time you see some sweeping claim online about what's really going on, are you going to take that extra 30 seconds to check the source? Because honestly, understanding the facts is the only place to start if we actually want to solve the problem.